is sometimes, why feeling good? Why feeling good is sometimes bad. What did we learn yesterday? We learned that you don't have to be an intellectual to think about happiness, the family, St. Augustine, faith and reason. In fact, you're better off if you're not. You supply basic common sense to your life experience, to your struggles, to your everyday existence. Because the word happiness is a weighted term. It's a compass point term that points you in a certain direction or points you away from a certain direction. We also learned that in spite of the book I wrote, it's possible to talk about these things in everyday conversation. You might know what the word eudaimonia means, but you can translate that. You can translate that into happiness understood in moral terms, understood as a morally good life, judged by other people who understand what moral standards really are. Now, I want you to think about a hypothetical. Hypothetical. How many of you have children? Okay. And do you remember the delicious moment at the birth of your first child? Like nothing else. It's too bad the second and third ones, kind of don't get the same number of photographs, the same amount of clothes, the same, cooing and so on from the relatives. But do you remember the proudest moment of my life, maybe the happiest day of my life, next to the day we adopted our son in Bucharest? That day. But was the day my daughter, the only cradle Catholic in my family, because my wife's a convert too, from Southern Baptist, was the day we baptized Hannah. And of course, that's a day when you baptize your child, what are you doing? You're sacramentally wishing for their happiness. Because you're wishing for their salvation. You're wishing for their holiness. For their sanctity. And when you wish for their happiness when they're a few months old, what does that include? Think of all the things that it includes. It includes that they be a good person. It includes that they have virtue, that they behave themselves. It includes the kind of family that they'll have, whether they're married with kids or part of a religious family or a priestly family, that they have a community of people that love them, that they have friends. It includes health, enough wealth to have the basic goods of life. It includes luck, that fortune. It includes all those things, right? But what happens when they get older? I have given my parents so much heartache. Now, my father passed away a few years ago. He was finally proud of me. It took him 78 years. And maybe in the last year of his life, he said, you've done all right. Because when I was a philosophy professor, I was a failure. I was no good. I was wasting my time. Because he had to write me a check every now and then to bail me out. But what do we put our parents through? First of all, we never behave. We always make big mistakes along the way. There is tragedy, there is death. That saddest thing is the death of children. There is financial and vocational failure. There's divorce, annulment. Now, these aren't things that you wish for the child you baptize. But you never stop wishing them happiness. But what happens when they get older and they haven't turned out to be as good a person as you hoped as a parent? Maybe they're, in your eyes, not really very good people. Maybe they have done things, they have habits, they have vices you don't approve of. You still wish them happiness, but what do? If you're totally consistent, you know that they're going to have to change their moral habits to become happy. But that's not what parents usually do. Parents usually say, well, as long as they feel good about themselves wherever they are in their life, or whatever kind of person they are, that wish them that happiness. In other words, they cave in. And they wish them feel-good happiness because the other happiness just didn't happen. And this is what has happened to the idea of happiness in our world. It has succumbed to the pressure of moral failure. It has succumbed to the pressure that everybody has a right to happiness regardless of who they are, their habits, whether they're virtues or vices. Everybody, remember the French Revolution? Everybody has a right to happiness. Our Declaration of Independence, everybody doesn't have a right to happiness, but has the right to pursue happiness. It shows that our founding fathers are a lot smarter than the French Revolutionary theorists. Now, I'm a parent. I'm not like the cradle Catholics in the room. I mean, as a Catholic publisher, I'm pretty pitiful. I mean, guys like Phil Lawler and Pat Madrid, they don't have houses big enough for all their kids. You know, every time I talk to Pat Madrid, his wife's pregnant again. Great guy, great magazine, Envoy. Carl Keating. We won't talk about Dale Vree. In case you don't know, we're having a quarrel right now. But we'll work it out. Will I have the toughness to continue wishing my children full happiness regardless of what happens to them in their lives? That doesn't mean, even if I come to the point where I decide they're not really living a happy life, doesn't mean I don't love them. But isn't love something that recognizes the truth about what you love and who you love? I mean, is true love blind? I don't think so. I think true love begins with the perception of what's really there. I mean, this is what old Doc Carlson over here with his side, his six-shooter in his pocket has been slinging at you guys for the last 2 days. Never ends. Before we get in, let's talk a little bit about the language problem. For the 10 years that I researched this subject and lectured on it and studied it, people kept saying, the word happiness is just too far gone. I mean, yesterday I slipped with the bishop and said something about my book. I'm really happy with it. And there you go. And he corrected me. I'm pleased with it. I'm satisfied with it. And consistency is not my virtue. And so I looked at the alternatives. Now, among academicians who talk about happiness, some of them use the phrase well-being. how's your well-being this morning? And I wish you well-being. And of course, it technically is precise. You know, your whole being is well, meaning good. And that's accurate, but it has no persuasive power. Some use the phrase human flourishing. And of course, you know, it makes you feel like you're a vegetable, or, you know, you belong in some kind of store window or something. And I just decided I would spend my time trying to fight for, surprise, surprise, and rehabilitate this good old word, happiness, and happy. And the decision that I made was because I saw, as I told you yesterday, how people continue to use those words in such destructive ways. So we've got to rescue that word, or the word happiness will go on its merry way, misinforming people, giving them justification for things they shouldn't do, failing to justify what they're doing well, and they don't even know it. How many times do you meet people who are suffering and they're guilty for suffering, and they should be suffering? It's good. Sometimes it's good to feel bad. And the opposite. I mean, my board at Crisis Magazine, the one thing they don't want me ever to do is call them and whine. Oh, it's so hard to raise money. I'm getting beat up by the newspaper. Dale Vree at the New Oxford Review doesn't like me anymore. And they say to me, Dale, don't you realize this is what you asked for? This is your job. This is what you do. If you don't like it, don't do it. And they're exactly right. So sometimes it's good for me to feel bad. It's just part of my job. It means I'm engaged. And as a human being, sometimes I get down about it. Now, language. So we're going to stick with happiness, because you know what? If you look at the way the words well-being and flourishing are used, even in the academic world, those words get used as a forms of psychological happiness anyway. So they've been scuttled as well. So using those terms hasn't saved the moral meaning of happiness either. Now, we've been discussing emotions. I am, I think, the most emotional male I know. Not kidding. Ask my wife. I cry at the trolley song in Meet Me in St. Louis. Every time. When my family, when we go to movies, we went to Little Nemo, they're always looking at me to see when I'm going to cry. You know, at what point? You know, and my wife and my daughter gang up on me, kidding me. There he goes. See, there he goes. So, I speak for myself, but I don't think my fellow scholars up here are trying to run away or deprecate emotion whatsoever. In fact, emotions are wonderful. The question becomes, how are they connected to this thing we've been talking about called intellect, and how are they connected to love? And what role do they have in living a good life, living a happy life? What role do they have in virtue? Because to really answer the question that, who was raising that question last night? Where is he? Jeremy. Okay, Jeremy. To really answer his question, you really got to understand the relation of emotion to virtue. I mean, that's the key. The short answer is that all virtues are bound up with emotions. Emotions are intrinsic to them. Something like temperance, for example, precisely what it does is to order the desire for pleasure, or to order the use of things that we enjoy. So virtues are totally about ordering, maybe you don't like that word, maybe targeting the emotions to make sure the emotions are connected to what is really helpful to us in life and beneficial. Now, but Jeremy, the point I really wanted to make precisely to you is this. Now, I guess I shouldn't ask this, but do you have a significant other?
Not as of Tuesday.
Okay, all right. But now, my problem is I'm always sticking my foot in it wherever I go. Wherever I go. 53 and I'm still doing it. When Jeremy met Jill the first time, they were walking up a hill to fetch a pail of water. Now let's say that Jeremy and Jill had never met before. And this was a blind date, and they were set up to, what? Fetch a pail of water. So let's actually put ourselves in Jeremy's shoes and Jill's shoes. The first thing that happens to Jeremy and Jill is that they see one another. That's the very first thing that happens. I mean, they might have some preconceptions based upon how this third party set them up. And that, of course, all goes into the mental response to what they see. But the first thing that happens is called vision. Vision of the other. Now, that, Jeremy, is a mental act. I mean, it happens with the eyeballs, right? But what you see with the eyeballs immediately passes through concepts into the brain, and you start saying, good looking, nice eyes, carries herself well. A little too tough on, a little too much makeup, but, immediate. And she's doing the same thing to you. Lose the beard, she's thinking. If he lost the beard, he'd look good. Now, the moment you see Jill, because of these very instantaneous, you're not aware, they're intuitional. But they're going through the brain, the speed of sound. You get feelings and emotions. If you fall in love, you get a passion, which, as Scott was explaining last night, is even deeper. But you see, you would have never gotten that eliciting of desire, of interest, of love, or any of the... And of course, I'm not trying to put love in the emotion category, but because that's really in the will category, but they're all tied together. Without that initial moment of vision. And we're going to use the word vision now in a broader sense to cover what you hear her say, if you hold her hand, how you feel her hand, everything that comes to you through your senses about Jill goes through this thing called a brain, a mind, an intellect, whatever you want. And all the delight, all the feelings, all the pleasure, all the emotion is mediated through there. So the simple point that I think we scholars, I hate you calling me that, because that insinuates no real life experience, that I can't get down and dirty with the best of you. All that insinuates is that even chronologically, Jeremy, the intellect acts first. But it's also in the sense of ontologically, existentially prior. It has to be there first for all these things to happen. So it's first in time and first in order. Jack meets Jill. He falls in love. Why? because his mind makes a judgment. The will follows the emotions, the feelings, and so forth. That's why it's so important what goes in your mind. I mean, what goes in your mind will color and filter those judgments, the judgments about what you love. And what you love, I think we forget, has a huge effect on what kind of person you become. Because when you love something, you affectively, through the emotions, Jeremy, affectively unite with it. And when you affectively, through the emotions, unite with something, it changes who you are. This is why the culture is so important. The arts, the books you read, the music you listen to, the films you like, the magazines you read, the friends you have, the liturgy you enjoy, the priest homilies, all this goes into shaping you, shaping your character, and therefore shaping, and I'm not going to take those extra 2 minutes that Father stole from me here, because I'm a bigger person than that. But I do want to end with as I will with every lecture, a quote from Aquinas. I said yesterday, Aquinas' quote was, "Happiness is in the one who is happy." Today, I want to quote this: "He who sees God cannot be without delight." In other words, cannot be without taking joy in the possession of the object of his happiness, his creator, his redeemer, God. So yes, the emotions are right at the heart of the Christian life and of the authentically happy life, but they come second. Thank you very much.